Chapter 347 and 348. 1 week later, somewhere around the western border of the Land of Fire. Inside an underground cave sat 3 people with 3 people around a round stone table, while a single person stood at the back of each of the 3. The flickering flames of the candles made their shadows sway back and forth. These 3 people sitting around the round stone table are none other than the Sandame Hokage of Konoha, Yandame Reikage of Kyumo, and Yandame Kazekage of Suna. While the people standing behind them are Nara Shikaku, Mabui, and Baki respectively. After a long silence, Sandame Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen was the first one to break the silence. While holding his tobacco pipe in one hand, he passed on all the information Konoha has collected of Akatsuki to the other 2 Kages, and said, "Please look at this." Receiving the information, Kazekage briefly glanced at the data collected by Konoha, and his face can't help but become gloomy. Smack. Crush. While Reikage on the other hand smacked the table and shouted, "Akatsuki organization has grown to such a degree. Hokage, your Konoha has inescapable responsibility in this." Hokage nodded and said lightly, "I do not intend to shirk the responsibility that Konoha bears, but right now our top priority is to get rid of the threat of the Akatsuki organization that is destabilizing the shinobi world by tilting the balance of power." Kazekage said, "Uchiha Shinichi with Manjikyu Sharingan, Sasori with hundreds of puppets which also includes the puppet of the previous Kazekage, Immortal Kakuzu of Takigakure with 5 hearts, Hirako with 5 Kekii Genkai, an unknown individual with space-time jutsu, Biwa Juzo one of the former 7 ninja swordsmen of the Kirigakure wielder of Kubikuribocho, Shino Jinchuriki of Demon Morio of the destroyed land of demons, Orochimaru one of the 3 Sannin of Konoha and a plant-like creature. Apart from these there is also that leader of Akatsuki." The more he read, the more worried Kazekage got and finally can't help but sigh. "I never would have expected that Akatsuki organization would have grown to such a point. If they are allowed to continue anymore, they will soon subvert the pattern of the shinobi world." Nara Shikaku shook his head, and said, "No Kazekage Dano." While Hokage continued Nara Shikaku's words with a deep voice, "They have already begun to subvert the pattern of the shinobi world. One shinobi village cannot deal with Akatsuki organization alone. Combined power is needed." Reikage said, "Who will be participating in this joint raid from your villages?" Sandame groaned and replied, "From Konoha, I will personally take action, then Jiraiya, additionally, Nara, Yamanaka, and Akimichi patriarchs too, and our most elite team consisting of, Hataki Kakashi Uchiha Shursui, Hyuga Kuroto, Might Guy will also be participating, finally a few other highly trusted Umbu will also be participating in the operation." Kazekage said, "From Suna, I will personally participate, honored siblings, as well as Pakura and a few selected Umbu, will also be participating in the raid." Seeing that both Hokage and Kazekage were coming in person as well as bringing some of their best men, Reikage nodded in satisfaction then said, "That's good, from Kyumo I will personally participate, apart from me B and Yujito ni, as well as some other highly trusted Umbu and Jonin will be participating together with me." When Hokage and Kazekage heard the names of B and Yujito ni participating in the raid, both of them showed an unexpected look. This raid against Akatsuki is extremely dangerous. The fact that Reikage is willing to bring both of the Jinchuriki was surprising. This also shows Reikage's determination to eradicate Akatsuki organization. Outside the cave where the 3 Kage were gathered, all the other accompanying shinobi were standing guard here. At this time, Jiraiya came next to Kuroto and asked in a low voice, "Are you sure that the leader of the Akatsuki organization has the Rinnegan Dojutsu?" Kuroto nodded, "The information I have obtained says so Jiraiya-sama. As for whether it is really true, I cannot be sure, but perhaps it is true as having the Rinnegan Dojutsu might give the leader of Akatsuki organization enough power to reign in individuals as strong as the members of Akatsuki organization." Jiraiya sighed and his face now had a tangled expression. When Jiraiya learned the news about the leader of Akatsuki having the Rinnegan, the first person Jiraiya recalled was obviously that red-haired silent child named Nagato from the 3 children he taught in the Land of Rain during his 3 years stay in Land of Rain. Even though Nagato did not have any special control over those dojutsu back then, the ocular power that dojutsu had made Jiraiya believe that they are perhaps truly Rinnegan. At that time, Jiraiya even believed Nagato to be the child of the prophecy, who would bring a great revolution to the shinobi world. Who can save this shinobi world, but alas that did not happen. After returning to Konoha, Jiraiya heard of the death of the 3, this news devastated him, and since then Jiraiya did not venture to the Land of Rain due to obvious reasons. After a long silence, Jiraiya said with a sad voice, "If this information is correct, then perhaps I know who the mysterious leader of the Akatsuki organization is." "What? Who?" Kuroto exclaimed, faked, in a surprised look. Jiraiya shook his head and does not seem to want to talk about this anymore. Instead, he spoke, even Orochimaru has joined the Akatsuki organization. I seem to be able to save no one. Will you be able to fight against Orochimaru should he come after you during this raid? Kuroto said after a while of silence, there is no other option, even if he was my sensei, even if he taught me many things, but, he has betrayed the village and has joined hands with a criminal organization, as his former disciple and subordinate. If I have to fight against him, then I will do so without any hesitation. This was of course a lie. Orochimaru has already betrayed Akatsuki long ago, but there was no need to inform others of this. In fact, Kuroto also did not inform the villagers of the betrayal and death of Shino. The reason is of course to make everyone take this battle extremely seriously. The more awed everyone will be of the Akatsuki, the more cautious they will act, the more chances of success of this operation. Jiraiya sighed after hearing Kuroto's words. It was his duty to bring back Orochimaru all along, but he failed and now this happened. As a teacher and a friend he is being proven to be a failure. One disciple died and he couldn't do anything, the other has turned into the leader of a criminal organization. One friend is lamenting the pain of losing her otuto and lover while the other has taken the road of no return, and even joined a terrorist organization, and yet he couldn't do anything to save either. If that's not a failure then what is? Not wanting to talk anymore, Jiraiya turned around and walked away. Perhaps he wanted to be alone for some time. Kuroto knows that Jiraiya is struggling but he cannot take care of the old man. Right now, his entire focus is on Akatsuki organization. The people present here make up a pretty strong lineup. From Kumo's side, Kuroto easily recognized Killer Bee, Yujito Ni who was glaring daggers at Kuroto and the rest of the team -11, then there is young lazy Darui, Samui, and Mabui being present inside the cave. From Suna, Kuroto could see honored siblings of Suna, Pakura, as well as Maki, Pakura's disciple, with Baki being present inside. Lastly, from Konoha, there is Jiraiya, Shisui, Kuroto, Kakashi, Might Guy, Yamanaka Inoichi, Akimichi Choza, and finally Shikaku Nara being present inside the cave. While supporting his chin, Kuroto thought, counting 3 Kages, Jiraiya-sama, Shisui, Jinchuriki of Hachibi and Nibi, Elder Chio, and finally Pakura. There are already 9 Kage-class individuals present here. Then if I count Inoshikacho patriarchs, Kakashi, Guy, Elder Ebizo, Baki, Maki, who is surprisingly extra strong compared to the original story because of Pakura being alive here, Darui, Samui, and Mabui, there are more than 12 elite Jonin-class shinobi, and finally, I am also here. So, I think the chances of us winning against Akatsuki, especially with an element of surprise, are quite high. And this is obviously not the final raid. Suna may not have deployed many Umbu because of what recently transpired in Suna, but Konoha and Kumo are not the same. More of the direct Umbu will be participating in the raid. If nothing goes wrong, I might be able to take advantage of the chaos and take away the Rinnegan pair from the eyes of Nagato. This thought flashed in Kuroto's mind. Kuroto is actually very interested in the prophecy of the great toad sage Gamamaru. According to his prophecy, a revolution is inevitable, and such a revolution will be brought on by the child of prophecy, which means that in a certain way the resurrection of Otsutsuki Kagaya will happen regardless of others' actions. So Kuroto is a little curious, what exactly will happen should the Rinnegan that can bring back Kagaya is obtained by him? Will Jubi still be revived? Will Kagaya still come back or is it not going to be the case? Whether it is Hokage, Reikage, or Kazekage, each of them is very eager to destroy the Akatsuki organization as soon as possible, so they soon reached a consensus. In order to discuss a detailed plan of action for the raid, Hokage also summoned Jiraiya and Hyuga Kuroto into the cave. Reikage summoned Shi and Yujito Ni, while Kazekage summoned Elder Ebizo and Pakura. Pointing at Kuroto, Sandame introduced Kuroto to everyone. I think everyone here knows him, and for those who don't, I will introduce him. He is Hyuga Kuroto, and it was him who discovered the base of Akatsuki organization. If anyone has a question from him, they can directly ask him. The Reikage was the first to question, is the news about Hanzo's death at the hands of the leader of Akatsuki organization certain? Kuroto nodded calmly, yes, Hanzo died in a civil war within Amigakure. The leader of the winning side is someone who calls himself Pain. It is said that Pain went on to execute all the relatives and friends of Hanzo in order to stop the ones who would later come back at him seeking revenge. Despite this, there are occasional appearances of supporters of Hanzo, but they are all unilaterally crushed by Pain himself. Anyway, after taking control over Amigakure, Pain went on to establish Akatsuki organization, which we know is currently. Kazekage questioned, and the news about the leader of Akatsuki having the Rinnegan dojutsu? Kuroto nodded, I cannot be certain about this as I have never seen them personally, but I did hear some mentions of Pain having the Rinnegan Dojutsu, so it should be true. Elder Ebizo questioned, the specific locations within Amigakure where the members of the Akatsuki organization are in collective? Kuroto thought about it a little and said, as I mentioned previously, the entire Amigakure is under Akatsuki organization's control, so the entire village is the base of Akatsuki. The members could be anywhere within the village if they are present in Amigakure. Yujito Ni, who was leaning on the sidewall, said, without a specific location, how do we launch a surprise attack? The village is too big, particular locations have to be determined first, otherwise we will be discovered before we can reach up to the leader of Akatsuki. Everyone nodded in agreement with Yujito's words. Everyone present is an experienced shinobi, so everyone understands that the importance of intelligence is extremely important. Warfare between shinobi is majorly warfare of intelligence. If they do not know the accurate information of the point of attack, then they cannot launch the surprise raid. Looking at the crowd, Kuroto felt a headache. Of course, he also understands the importance of intelligence, but what he has said is already everything he knows. Understanding everyone's doubts, Kuroto said, I suggest that we gather all our forces and launch a surprise attack on Amigakure to ensure the success of the operation. Absurd. She immediately said. Kazekage also shook his head, the enemy we are facing is too dangerous. I think you understand this full well, Kuroto-kun, it is too risky to act without sufficient intelligence. Nara Patriarch nodded in agreement, and even Sandem-sama's expression was the same. At this time, Jiraiya volunteered, in that case how about I sneak into Amigakure for preliminary investigation of the exact location of Akatsuki organization. Driven by his sense of responsibility, Jiraiya felt that he has to go to Amigakure in person, and if possible, persuade Nagato to return to the right path. Kuroto glanced at Jiraiya and sighed, does he really have such an ardent wish to die at the hands of his student? Sandame nodded, all right, be sure to be vigilant. After all, it was just a reconnaissance mission, and Sandame believed that with Jiraiya's abilities there should be no problem to sneak into Amigakure and inquire their intelligence. But Kuroto was so not having it, and directly interjected, I object. Obviously he is not going to allow Jiraiya to just go to death, it's fine if the old man wants to die, but Kuroto is not going to allow Jiraiya to waste their entire operation. It must not be forgotten that the current Amigakure is much more dangerous compared to the time when Jiraiya sneaked into Amigakure in the main canon. Currently, almost all the members of Akatsuki are alive, and coupled with Hirako also being there, if Jiraiya is discovered then he will die for sure. Jiraiya, as well as others, looked at Kuroto with a surprised expression, especially Sandame. He has never seen Hyuga Kuroto act the way he was doing so here, feeling all the eyes upon him. Kuroto said with a deep voice, once the investigation is discovered, and if the Akatsuki organization is alerted, the raid will fail without a doubt, and there might even be repercussions. Jiraiya waved his hands with a smile, and said, do not worry kid, my intelligence gathering abilities are very good. I won't be discovered by th. Before Jiraiya could finish his sentence, Kuroto interrupted him midway, I am not underestimating your abilities Jiraiya-sama, it's just that this mission is too difficult. With a pause, Kuroto swept his gaze at everyone, and continued, I am afraid to say that no one here has this ability. Reikage grunted, mind your tone brat. While Yujito Ni snorted, if you can discover the intelligence on Akatsuki, then why can't we? Asked by Yujito Ni, Kuroto immediately activated his Byakugan and said, I have Byakugan, in terms of sensory abilities, and intelligence gathering abilities no one here is as good as me. Now prove me wrong. You. Yujito Ni stopped midway with anger clearly appearance on her face. More so because she did not have any retort, as when the mention of Byakugan came she was left speechless. After all, the reputation of Byakugan is undeniable. Even the others couldn't support Yujito Ni's argument and just chuckled lightly. With Yujito Ni silent, Kuroto continued, I would like everyone here to know that the rain of Amigakure contains a special type of chakra that is very hard to perceive. I suspect that the rain is a sensory type ability through which the user can perceive the presence of foreign chakra sneaking into the village. I reckon that not even Amigakure shinobi and even other members of Akatsuki are not aware of this. I was able to see through the rain because of the extraordinarily high perception abilities of my Byakugan. No one here can sense this. If you have sneaked in Amigakure without knowing this fact, then you would have been discovered even before you could collect any intelligence. As soon as they heard this, everyone took a cold breath. And all they could think was that if without knowing this news anyone had sneaked into Amigakure they would have been discovered so easily. At the same time, they can't help but wonder just who can use such large-scale ninjutsu. After speaking this, Kuroto looked at the three Kage. If the three Kage understands, and agrees to directly launch an attack, only then the raid against the Akatsuki organization would result in a guaranteed 100% success. And if they disagree with Kuroto, and insist on carrying out a preliminary investigation in advance, then the results will become unpredictable. In fact, the coalition might even suffer if that happens. But apparently, Kuroto expected too much, and Kazekage was the first to deny Kuroto's approach. Investigation is essential. We cannot omit this step because of the level of difficulty of this mission, and as said previously by the Kyumo Jonin, Amigakure is too big to directly rush there with no apparent directions and specific location in mind. With Reikichi's personality, he actually somewhat agrees with Hyuga Kuroto's suggestion, but considering both the Jinchuriki will also be taking part in the mission, he can't bring himself to nod. After all, the survival of Kyumo also depends on that, so he had to be cautious. In the end, Hokage also shook his head. Blind assault is too risky. Kuroto sighed and did not say anything anymore. Kuroto understands that the success and failure of this operation completely depend on the element of surprise, but from the other's standpoint, rushing headfast into the base of the enemy without any prior information about the enemy's specific location is uncharacteristic for a shinobi. Kuroto can understand the worry of the three Kage because of the deterrence of the enemy, but Kuroto can no longer do anything about it anymore. At this point, Kuroto has already lowered his expectations for this raid. Akatsuki organization has a lot of hidden cards that even Kuroto is unaware of, so there is no telling what other things they will find there. Finally, an investigation team was made, and because of Kuroto's repeated insistence, the lineup was made to be quite good. The team leader for the preliminary investigation team is Elder Chiyo, together with him is Elder Ebizo of Suna. From Konoha, Jiraiya, Hyuga Kuroto, and Yamanaka Inoichi, for obvious reasons, then there is Yujito Ni and Samui from Kyumo. As two top-level puppeteers, the abilities of the honored siblings are unquestionable. Using their puppets they can carry out all sorts of infiltration and intelligence gathering, especially Elder Ebizo, who specializes in the use of infiltration-type puppets and was a great addition to the team. Then, Kuroto himself for already having ventured into Amigakure once, Jiraiya for his specialization in intelligence gathering, and finally Yamanaka Patriarch for keeping everyone sneaking into Amigakure stay connected with someone. As for Kyumo's side, Samui was fine because of her calm persona and level-headedness. However, Kuroto did not want Yujito Ni to participate but was helpless as the latter was adamant in doing so, and snorted at Kuroto's attempt. Yujito Ni stated that her cat's sensory abilities provided by the bijou sealed inside her will make investigation much easier. Finally annoyed at her behavior and arrogant attitude, Kuroto cursed under his breath, "Fine, go ahead and offer yourself to Akatsuki for all I care." Time was pressing. With the investigative team established, the three Kage issued the order of secretly transferring their base nearby the Land of Rain. Meanwhile, the investigative team also sneaked into the Land of Rain. Of course, the entire Land of Rain is not in range of the Rain Tiger at will technique, so sneaking inside the Land of Rain was very easy. Drip. 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 Looking at the gloomy clouds up ahead and the light drizzle, Elder Chiyo said, "Further ahead is Amigakure." Jiraiya said, "I can sneak into Amigakure by using ninja toads, through the waterway." Amigakure is densely covered throughout with a dense waterway network, so sneaking inside the village through the waterway is the best option. The concealment will be guaranteed, so Elder Chiyo did not take too long to think and nodded immediately. As a result, the 7 people went into the mouth of the toad summoned by Jiraiya. The toad then sneaked into the water channel of Amigakure and released them outside a sewer which was covered by a roof. Byakugan. The first thing Kuroto did next was to activate the Byakugan and observe if there were any traces of chakra present in the raindrops. As expected, it was there. Elder Chiyo asked, "So?" Kuroto nodded. "Chakra traces are present, which means the technique is activated." Others also tried to sense, but they could hardly sense anything. Not even Yamanaka Patriarch could sense it, yet Hyuga Kuroto could see with his Byakugan. Yamanaka Patriarch said, "I suppose that you were accurate in this, Kuroto-kun." Jiraiya nodded. Since no normal perceptual barriers are covering Amigakure, so it is reasonable that the leader of the Akatsuki organization is using the ubiquitous rainwater as a means of sensing intruders. While everyone was talking, Kuroto thought to himself, "It stands to reason that Nagato can't always maintain this technique. It should be a big burden even for him. The only reason I revealed the existence of this technique to the Alliance was to make them give up on the idea of preliminary investigation, but given the fact that the technique is active right now, is it just a coincidence or has he noticed something?" Kuroto did not voice out his thoughts to others as everyone quickly came out of the sewer and hid inside a building without allowing the raindrops to land on them. From their point of view, the streets of Amagakure seemed quite busy with hundreds of people passing through. After gaining a full view, Elder Chio said, "Everyone split up, remember to not let the raindrops touch you, and remember to shoot a signal flare if there is an emergency." Amagakure is too big, so to increase the efficiency of their actions it is natural to split up, therefore, the team was now divided into 4 sub-teams. Ni Yujito and Samui are part of the first team, Elder Chio and Elder Ebizo of the second team, Hyuga Kuroto and Yamanaka Inoichi part of the third team, and finally, Jiraiya who will act solo. With the 4 directions decided, the sub-teams then split up into 4 directions. "Well, Inoichi-san, shall we go?" Kuroto asked politely. Yamanaka Inoichi nodded and followed Hyuga Kuroto. While walking next to, Yamanaka Patriarch asked, "Say Kuroto-kun, do you mind if I ask a question?" Kuroto shook his head, and said, "Not at all Inoichi-san, go ahead. How did you sneak in Amagakure the last time you came here?" Yamanaka Inoichi questioned. Kuroto was surprised by the question of the Yamanaka Patriarch, then said, "I came from the front door as a businessman to issue a task commencement to Amagakure. While I came in, I left behind a shadow clone who used chakra suppression technique to hide his chakra. Since the rain only discovers foreign chakra signatures, and since my shadow clone was using chakra suppression technique, it wasn't found by the rain." Chakra suppression technique? If I remember correctly, doesn't this jutsu limit all the other abilities of the user? Inoichi questioned with a frown. Kuroto took out a rough map of Amagakure, which he received from Shinichi since Kuroto didn't actually personally come to Amagakure, and while studying it carefully, he said, "That is true, but using that had 2 other benefits. First, my shadow clone was able to roam around the village with a civilian's authority, and second, because the chakra suppression technique was being used, therefore, the shadow clone I left behind could stay much longer than normal. During one of the casual walks as a civilian, my shadow clone discovered Uchiha Shinichi and Biwa Juzo's duo. After discovering them and some silent digging around for about a month-long stay in Amagakure, my shadow clone was able to discover many things, especially related to Akatsuki. After discovering such shocking facts, the shadow clone lifted itself, and I received all the information while I was in another country carrying out my investigation in that country." Yamanaka Inoichi was stunned and nodded with an odd tone. "It's rather remarkable, being able to use chakra suppression technique alone is very difficult. I am convinced now, without a doubt, you truly are one of the best of your generation." Kuroto shook his head, and said, "I still have too much to learn, I am still too far behind Yandem-sama. To become Hokage, I have to be much better, much better." "Do you aspire to become the Hokage?" Inoichi was rather surprised by Kuroto's words. Kuroto nodded, and said, "I aspire to become someone like Minato-sama, thus I wish to become Konoha's Hokage in the future. Is it strange, Inoichi-san?" After a bit of silence, Yamanaka Patriarch said, "Well, Yandame Hokage-sama was one of a kind, his charismatic persona and that confident look was more than enough to bring a change in the morale of his followers. If you aspire to become someone like him, then the road is still far ahead. Perhaps you can become the Hokage. I am not the one to decide, but you still have a long way to go." Kuroto nodded and said, "I understand, thank you for your advice Inoichi-san, I will that in mind to improve myself and become worthy of becoming the Hokage." "I wish you good luck in that endeavor Kuroto-kun. If you do become the Hokage, do not forget to visit the Yamanaka flowers, it would be an honor to have you visit us." Inoichi encouraged Kuroto. He did not touch the matter of cage bird seal, which will be the biggest difficulty for Hyuga Kuroto as a member of the branch family. Of course, Inoichi is not dense enough to understand not to touch on such sensitive matters. Although the 2 people were talking, they did not forget the objective of their mission, all this while they were carrying it out very seriously. Kuroto has already been to many shinobi villages, and perhaps, only Amagakure is somewhat peaceful compared to all the other shinobi villages. Even Sunagakure and Kusagakure are not as peaceful as Amagakure is currently. Perhaps even Yamanaka Inoichi felt this and sighed, this peaceful atmosphere will be destroyed as the raid on Amagakure starts. Converging their mixed thoughts, Kuroto and Inoichi further tried to find leads on the location where the leader of Akatsuki could be hiding. "Kuroto-kun, do you have any leads where the leader of Akatsuki could be present in general?" asked Inoichi. Kuroto thought about it a little, then looked towards the tallest tower of Amagakure. Inoichi followed Kuroto's gaze and also looked in that direction, that tower. Kuroto nodded, "I am not sure. However, it is the most likely place." To be honest, Kuroto doesn't remember much as to where exactly did Nagato stayed hidden while controlling Rikudo Rain, but considering the height of that tower it is the most likely place, as transmitting chakra from that height should be the best option. Moreover, Tendo Pain sits on the tongue sticking out of that face structure on the tallest tower. It is conceivable that standing on that tower should give a good look over the entire Amigakure village. Shot, whistle. Bang. While Kuroto and Inoichi looked at the tower and were trying to figure out a few more things, suddenly they both heard the sound of a signal flare being fired. Kuroto and Inoichi looked in the direction of the sound and were able to spot a green flare lighting up the sky below the clouds. Signal flare, someone was discovered already? Kuroto muttered with a frown. Inoichi nodded, it appears so, I will try to see who is it, and see if I can. Kuroto shook his head, and said, no Inoichi-san, the enemy has discovered our tracks, and since we are in their territory so that means they already have us on their radar. If you try communicating with them in such a situation, I am afraid our position will also be discovered. What we have to focus now is on retreating, we have to get out of this village as soon as we can. Inoichi saw the seriousness in Kuroto's expression and nodded. Kuroto no longer cared about the scouting mission. After all, someone has been discovered just now, it is no longer possible to continue the mission, in fact, doing so is even meaningless. But before Kuroto and Inoichi could go, Kuroto was able to sense someone coming towards them. Kuroto immediately alerted the Yamanaka Patriarch, Inoichi-san, be ready, we have company, and I suspect that since we have company, so the others are also being chased. Now, one of us has to retreat, while the other has to stay behind. I will be the one to stay behind as I am already quite familiar with Amigakure, and since I have also mastered chakra suppression technique, so I can find my way back to the retreat point without being noticed, so please retreat while I draw the attention of the enemy coming towards us. After saying so, Kuroto did not wait for the reply from the Yamanaka Patriarch, and directly ran forward while letting the rain fall on him. Yamanaka Inoichi deeply looked at Hyuga Kuroto's back, then with a determined expression, he also made his way to the retreat point without drawing any attention upon him. While Kuroto took another route to the retreat point, suddenly he saw hundreds of pieces of paper falling down near him, and soon those hundreds of papers took the appearance of a Konan, the angel of Akatsuki, and Amigakure. With Konan hovering in mid-air, Kuroto came to a sudden halt and questioned, now what does this pretty lady want from someone like me? However, Konan does not seem to be in the mood of beating around the bush, and immediately questioned with a cold tone, show your true identity. Kuroto, who was currently disguised as Yato from Noragami, asked with a confused tone, what do you mean, pretty lady? I am just a wandering samurai here to take in the sights of Amigakure, and by the way, also challenge Hanzo Dano. That was your only chance, now die. With a cold snort, Konan immediately fired. Kuroto snorted and flashed away. The other party is obviously not someone who can be dealt with so easily. In the original story, she was the one who recruited and defeated Sasori with his Kazekage puppet. And Konan may have been defeated by both Jiraiya and Obito, but this does not mean she is weak. Jiraiya was only able to restrain her so easily because he had prior knowledge of the weakness of Konan's papers and thus used toad oil. While Obito relied on Izanagi, which was something Konan never expected even in the countless stimulations of her battle with him. So, her strength is very good, but what's more dangerous is her analytical ability. Being able to figure out the limits of Obito's Kamui proves this, and killing her won't be so easy, especially because Kuroto does not use oil and cannot effectively restrain her papers, from which she has created the unique jutsu which is Shikigami no Mai. If he fights Konan, other Akatsuki members will be drawn here, so staying here is no longer an option, as Kuroto doesn't want to be surrounded and hunted by Akatsuki members. I don't think that I can kill her without entering into Tenseigan chakra mode. This was his judgment while looking back. Konan indifferently looked at the running figure of this intruder, and muttered, pointless, you cannot escape. As she said that, she waved her hand, and instantly papers from her paper wings flew at the running Kuroto at an extremely fast speed, and at a large quantity. Kuroto immediately turned around and immediately drew the sword Kusanagi sword tied around his waist, and while standing at his position, he waved his swords at an extremely fast speed, such that his hands or blade couldn't even be perceived by normal vision. There were multiple afterimages left behind. Whyish. 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 The piece of paper that was cut into an extremely small size fell on the floor, but soon they ignited. Damn, I did not take the hidden random exploding tags into account. Since his Byakugan is currently deactivated, Kuroto was unable to distinguish between an ordinary paper and exploding tag.